Hello everybody. Welcome to the show. Hope you're all doing well. And today I wanted to show you guys my weird little chicken jail I built for those interested, as well as discuss the geochemist Clair Patterson and what we can learn from his story for our current times. But yeah, let me show you guys this chicken jail first. And there it is. It is a beauty. And what I did is I actually built a chicken jail out of spare parts from that old coop that I had built initially, the little coop that we had. And the last bit of that coop is actually right there, the part of it that didn't go towards the new coop. And I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Maybe make a rabbit hutch out of it or something. Get some rabbits. But in the meanwhile, this thing is very useful. What happens sometimes when you have chickens is they will go broody, meaning they will sit on other chickens' eggs. They'll sit around all day. They won't take proper care of themselves or eat or anything. And they will basically be miserable and stop producing eggs for 3 weeks because they think that they're trying to hatch. And there's a way to snap them out of it by putting them in a chicken jail. Now, a chicken jail can be anything. People will sometimes use an elevated wire mesh type of cage that's elevated on some wood. But the goal is to have a mesh bottom on it and a space from the ground, just like this. And all you got to do is you put the chicken in, and because it gets airflow underneath it and it can't properly sit down or get comfortable, what'll happen is it'll snap out of its broodiness. And this usually happens very quickly, approximately overnight, or even a little faster sometimes. Certainly worked very well for me overnight every time. And what I did is I even constructed this thing. See, those boards are attached, but the tray below isn't, so that when the chicken poops all night, as it just did actually, because I had one in here, I can get rid of what's underneath it, and there's no mess. So yeah, there you go. Random FrankenChickenJail, just out of totally spare parts that were laying around from that old coop. Anyway, let's discuss Clair Patterson, shall we? There you guys are. I decided to go outside where there's much better acoustics. So I haven't felt the need to make an off-topic video in a while. I guess I kind of felt that whenever I've needed to say something, I've definitely been getting it out on Twitter. Feel free to follow me because I'm pretty active on there day to day nowadays. But today I opened up my news feed and I saw that the local government, the Canadian government, is arguing about their carbon taxes, because up in Canada we have carbon taxes on like everything, and they're rising very aggressively. And basically, the opposition was telling the government, hey, there's inflation and all that, and carbon taxes keep rising. When are you going to give people a break? And the government was responding with, well, climate change is real and we have to deal with it. And if you don't support the climate, or rather, if you don't support the carbon taxes, then maybe you don't believe climate change is real. Well, I'm in the camp where I certainly believe climate change is real, and I'll tell you a little story as to why. And I'm also in the camp where I don't think that the carbon taxes are a feasible long-term policy. So I'll discuss the carbon taxes kind of in a separate video that I'll release right after this one. But first, let's talk about climate change. And for that, we got to talk about geochemist Clair Patterson. And what he is a guy who was alive in the mid 20th century, and he's credited in particular with discovering the age of the Earth. He's the guy who measured decaying uranium and figured out that it was 4.5 billion years old. First guy to do that. However, in my mind, that is by far his second greatest achievement. Because the other thing that Clair Patterson did is he discovered that humans were contaminating their entire environment with lead, and then he got rid of it. The way that this happened is back when he was trying to figure out the age of the Earth, his experiment kept meeting a dead end because his measurements for trace lead were all wrong. And the reason they were all wrong is because there was trace lead everywhere. And Clair Patterson ended up having to spend like 7 years building the world's first ultra clean room in order to be able to measure the trace lead in the zircon crystals that he was trying to measure without any side contamination. Well, finally he was successful, but once he was successful, he became obsessed with the question of trace lead. He was wondering, why is there trace lead everywhere? I mean, lead is incredibly toxic and poisonous to humans. Was the trace lead always there? Is there some amount of lead in the environment that's natural? So he started studying these questions. He was by then the world's foremost expert on trace lead, and he started looking for it and its concentrations everywhere. He tried testing it in deep water versus shallow water and discovered that there was way more lead contamination in the shallow waters. Considering how long it takes lead to get into deep waters, it then first triggered his suspicion that humans may be causing the lead contamination. Then he went to Antarctica and he measured the lead in ice samples, both ice samples from hundreds of years ago and more recent ice samples. And there he truly concluded quite firmly that, hey, this trace lead contamination thing is pretty new. And then, after doing a little bit of research, he figured out quite quickly, oh, it's the leaded gasoline. All of the vehicles on Earth are using leaded gasoline. They're emitting it. The lead goes everywhere, and that's why it's everywhere. Clair Patterson would then spend the next 15 years of his life convincing the industry and government and regulators that this was all actually happening. And he faced all sorts of counter experts in testimonies and committee hearings that would say, this Clair guy, he doesn't know what he's saying. There's always been some trace lead. And by the way, humans impacting the whole environment with their emissions all the way back in the 40s and 50s. This is impossible. Humans can't impact their climate in this way or their environment at large. We're just too small. Well, obviously, that argument should sound very familiar to those who listen in on climate change debates. And of course, Clair Patterson was completely right. Now, he doesn't get sole credit for getting rid of leaded gasoline. Turns out leaded gasoline was also doing some harm to catalytic converters, so the automotive industry did have some of its own motivations to get rid of the lead in gasoline, but certainly Clair Patterson was instrumental in speeding up the process. He lived another 15 years before he died after leaded gasoline was banned. And in that 15 years, the levels of lead in the environment dropped substantially. In the 25 years since Clair Patterson's death, the lead levels in our environment, in our shallow waters, in our food, in our blood, have all come down to practically zero. So he was 100% correct. He demonstrated that humans are able, even way, way back at 1930s, 1940s, 1950s emissions levels, to impact our environment in a huge way. And in a sense, he saved us all from poisoning. So that should tell you climate change is real. It's very, very, very likely man-made, and we have prior evidence, and that we should do something about it. But that doesn't mean carbon taxes are a viable, doable, survivable long-term solution. And I'll tackle that in the next video. If you like this little bit on Clair Patterson, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and I'll upload my thoughts on the Canadian carbon tax for those of you who care about that right in the next video. See ya.